Hi detail for science, looking at the use of chemicals. Thanks to Sam Moyle for producing this PowerPoint. So science understandings we're going to look at. Chemicals can interfere with cell metabolism and discuss possible benefits and or harmful effects of chemicals that human beings use. So we've looked previously at how environmental factors can affect cell metabolic processes and biochemical reactions in cells. And some of those environmental substances might be chemicals. So cyanide, carbon monoxide, snake venom, these can all interfere with biochemical reactions. And they can do this by disabling enzymes. So if we look at cyanide or hydrogen sulfide, they knock out the enzyme cytochrome oxidase. And that's a really big important part of the electron transport chain, the oxidative phosphorylation that we talked about before in the mitochondria. It transfers electrons from ferrocytochrome C to molecular oxygen, converting it to water. If you stop that, you don't make much ATP. And if you don't make much ATP, your cells will shut down because ATP drives many of the chemical reactions that occur in cells. Here are some chemicals that interfere with protein synthesis. So tetracycline, streptomycin, chloramphenicol, erythromycin, rifamycin. These are antibiotics. They're really good at stopping prokaryotes from working. We've got some other chemicals here. Some affect eukaryotes, some affect both. What these do is they just stop a specific protein from working. And if you stop a protein, that might be an enzyme. If that enzyme doesn't do a specific job, then you stuff up metabolic processes within the cell. So you need to be able to talk about benefits and potential harmful uses of the use of chemicals by humans. So in terms of benefits, we can look at our antibiotics over here. These are chemicals we take into our body. They kill bacteria that might cause infection and might cause illness. So if you don't have antibiotics, we would have a lot more bacterial infection. That would be bad. But there are bad chemicals as well. So radium, it's radioactive. It was used on watch faces and compasses to make them glow in the dark, but it wasn't known that radium would cause cancer. The ladies would lick and it was always ladies, the ladies would lick the paint brushes to get a fine tip so they could paint carefully onto the watch faces. They started developing cancers of their mouth and jaw, and their jaws fell apart and they died in horrific pain. Mercury is very bad. If mercury gets into the environment, bacteria can turn it into methyl mercury, which is really bad. It builds up in food chains. It causes disruption of metabolic pathways. It's a neurotoxin, is really, really bad. Another example of a bad chemical is thalidomide. It was used to treat morning sickness in pregnant women. It wasn't realised, but it also stops blood vessels from growing. So you got a lot of babies born with stunted limbs, and that carried on for generations. So the effect on one generation affected the babies that these kids were having as well. Interestingly, we're looking at using thalidomide for treating cancers. Cancerous tumours have to grow blood vessels, so if we can stop the blood vessels from growing, that might reduce the size of tumours. So that's an interesting thing. So it might be beneficial and it might be harmful at the same time. A lot of chemicals and growth hormones are used in agriculture. So we've got herbicides, pesticides, or they might help the plants grow faster than they might normally. One of our weed killers is a hormone. In fact, it causes the cells of plants to grow too quickly for what resources they have, and that causes the plants to die. DDT, so dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane, it was a chemical used as a pesticide. It killed off bad insects. It also killed off good insects like pollinators. It built up in food chains and led to top predators dying off. So things like eagles would die because they get large amounts of DDT built up through the food chain. So here's an example of an unintended consequences from SHE. So DDT is being sprayed, kills mosquitoes, but a lot of other diseases become prevalent. So how do we get those diseases becoming prevalent even though we killed off mosquitoes? A specific species of caterpillar wasn't affected by DDT. The wasps, however, that fed on the caterpillar died. Insect-eating lizards also died because we were eating the wasps that are containing the DDT. Dogs and cats who ate the lizards with large amounts of DDT in them started dying off, which means that rats will be flourishing. So we're getting large amounts of disease that's being transmitted from rats to humans since we've knocked out their predators, or because we're using this DDT to try and kill off other insects. So here's some good examples. So immunosuppressants, if you have an organ transplant, you take an immunosuppressant, that means that your body doesn't reject the organ that you've had placed into you. And the question is, why would your bodies reject organs even if they were a close match? Other good chemicals, we treat people with hormones if they're not producing enough of a particular hormone, for example, we can extract it from somebody else and give it to them. So hypothyroidism, so if your thyroid isn't producing enough thyroxine, it might grow. So by taking thyroxine into your body, you can cause that thyroid to shrink back to its regular size. Dwarfism, so giving human growth hormone. Contraceptives, so progesterone, estrogen. IVF, we give progesterone and estrogen again in different concentrations to promote ovulation. And also in diabetes, giving people insulin, if their pancreas isn't producing it, then that means that they can survive because they can then moderate the blood sugar. And we're going to learn about that a bit later on. So a key idea here is that chemical use needs to be monitored or assessed over a long period of time to ensure that there aren't any detrimental effects of the use of that chemical. So let's do our check. So chemicals can interfere with cell metabolism and discuss possible benefits and or harmful effects of chemicals that human beings use. So today for Science, we looked at the use of chemicals. That's it for this nice day. See ya.